All right, Saagar, what are you looking at?
Well, when our country is roiled by abortion politics, our president is abroad conferring with our allies at the G7 to confront a problem. Our sanctions against Russia are not working as well as they were intended. Let's revisit this for the last time. The emotional frenzy when the regime moved against Russia with promises that even taking them off of the SWIFT banking system would destroy their economy. News item after news item about this being banned, this company was being pulled out, that company's pulling out. It was not unreasonable, given what was promised by the West, to expect that the Russian economy would economically collapse with its removal from the international banking system, the effective isolation of its people, and especially the West pledge to boycott its oil. That was the promise at the time, right? Well, look, it's been several months now, and the effective admission by the New York Times, even by the Biden administration and others, is that our strategy has been a failure. As noted many times so far, Russia has posted an all-time high in oil profits, more than they have ever made in their history. The ruble remains one of the strongest currencies of the year relative to others, and while the Russian economy is projected to contract by 8 to 10%, the vast majority of that downside is hitting the Russian consumer, not the Putin war machine. At the same time, as we covered yesterday, the Russian war machine is actually doing better than ever. It just took a strategic city in eastern Ukraine. It continues to shell major port cities. It continues its barbaric airstrikes against Ukrainian civilian population in Kyiv. All of this is known to Western leaders, and so they're further pulling out the stops against Russia banning gold exports, which are its second largest outside of oil, and also a new round of potential oil sanctions. There's just one catch. Like the original ban, the current plan proposed by Biden and apparently agreed to by the G7 is perhaps one of the dumbest ever conceived. Biden and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen are proposing a price cap on Russian oil to hamstring their exports. Now, in effect, they are trying to form a buyer's cartel, dictating the price of oil that they and others will continue to pay for oil to try and deny Putin excess profits that the boycott is producing. There's one problem. A reason Putin is raking billions of oil profits in is because of the dynamics of a global oil market. Just because the West buys less oil doesn't matter. The Chinese and the Indians are, of course, buying Russian oil at a discount and still at a higher price, though, than before. Meanwhile, the West is paying all-time highs for gas with no end in sight. The current Biden plan is as follows. The West will set a maximum cap on Russian oil. Now that sounds really nice, but how does supply and demand work? If we are the only ones willing to pay X and they can get a higher price from Y, well, they're going to sell it to Y. So to try and circumvent that, they are envisioning a world where the West can guarantee a cheaper price of oil than the Russians at the discounted rate for the Chinese and the Indians to buy. One problem, though, as we're all finding out, there is only a finite amount of oil for us all to consume with our current infrastructure. Yes, we could pump all day. With refinery capacity in the West where it is and the inability of Europeans and others to plan for the future, where is this mystery oil going to come from? In effect, here is what would happen. A Russian price cap will mean we will need to make more of our oil supply available to the Chinese and the Indians at a lower price for them. In economics, there is no such thing as a free lunch. The person who is paying for that lunch will be you, me, and the rest of the West. It really does not take a genius to figure this out, which is why the global price of oil went up on the proposal of this plan. In fact, if China and India need to replace their oil with Russian oil on the current supply, it will spike the barrel price to $200 a barrel. Right now, it's at $112. Imagine what that means at the pump. We're talking about $7 a gallon nationally here in the United States. All predicated on the idea this will even be agreed to by the Chinese and the Indians. In the case of the Chinese, they're not doing it just to make a tidy profit, also to stick it to the West and support the Russian effort. The bottom line is this. A price cap will only work if you have total control over supply and demand. We have neither. This is a half-ass measure, which will only certainly increase the price of oil for us here at home, and the Russians would then probably still find a way to make money. Look, I'm not opposed to sanctions or tariffs or any other proposals, as long as they actually work. But the current sanctions are hurting our people much more than they're hurting the Russian war machine, who are actually winning on the battlefield right now. Even this so-called default by Russia that you're reading about on its debt, Read the fine print, people. Russia has plenty of money to pay its debts. We just cut them off on their ability to pay them. It's not a true default. If it was a true default, investors would actually be able to sue the government in English or US courts. But legally, and lawyers are looking at this right now, they're in a tricky spot because Russia could prove in court it has the means to pay. Even the effect of the default won't be as monumental when they last actually defaulted on their debt in 1918 after the Bolshevik Revolution. The simple truth in oil is that just like the situations with Iran and Venezuela, there is only so much you can do to minimize its use on the global market when it's a commodity that everyone on Earth uses. Iran has been in the oil business since 1979. They're doing fine. Yes, their people are suffering. The Venezuelans are suffering too, but their regime is also fine because of oil. That's how it goes. We can accept that oil sanctions will have a marginal impact at best, or we can keep throwing everything at the wall and increase the pain and suffering here at home. Maybe I'm callous, but how much longer should Americans pay $5 a gallon or potentially more to secure the integrity of eastern Ukraine? Seriously, how many square miles of territory is worth one more month or one more year of suffering for all of us? Someone should explain this to us in very clear terms as to why it is worth tremendous economic pain and more, not only to the consumer, but to all of the regular inputs that oil prices increase, which increase overall inflation in what is already looking like a recessionary economy. Biden and the West's handling of this crisis so far has meant sanctioning of our citizens, the reversion of European countries to coal-fired power plants, all to ensure political ends which are not working. This strategy has been a disaster. It is time to try something different. We need to change our incentive structure for the Ukrainians and the Russians to bring an end to this conflict and bring back Russian oil online to the global market. If we don't, we're in for a world of hurt. Sadly, that is exactly where the system is headed for right now. I mean, it really doesn't take a genius. You know, I'm reading this thing, I'm like, oh, global price cap.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.